Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ask Dr. Be Good show, the show where we talk about the politics, the pedagogy, the practices around public education. And sometimes we get to get a special insight into the opportunities that our school kids have, our families have, to learn from others. And sometimes it's the positive things that others have gone through, and sometimes those positive things are based on a negative beginning. And so we have an interesting story here today. Let me introduce Tricia Roos. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we start the story.
Absolutely. I live in Dallas, Texas, the place where we see four seasons every single week. And it's been a little crazy down here this year, especially. I live here with my husband, Jonas. We were college sweethearts and were married shortly after. We both went to Baylor University. And I've had three children. Cameron is 10 and a half. He's a fifth grader. Annabelle passed away in 2014-15. She lived for 6 days. And then Andy is my little rainbow baby. And that's the baby you have after a loss. And she's 5 and a half in kindergarten.
Well, and so your story is really based on Annabelle.
Mm-hmm.
And so um, tell us a little bit about Annabelle's story and her magical well, I say 6 days, she lived 6 days, but you knew way before. Tell us, when did you find out that you had a pregnancy that wasn't going the way you needed it to go?
Sure. Well, as most people are, you kind of think your life's going to go a certain way. And I was married with my husband and spent about 6 years together without children. And when we had Cameron in 2011, there were no complications. It was a pretty easy, healthy pregnancy. And that's just kind of how I assumed, life was supposed to go. We were the first of our friend group to have a child. And so I wasn't aware yet of all the complications that pregnancy can have with a lot of people. And so a few years later, when Cameron was about 3 and a half, he started asking us for a lady baby, as he called it. And I guess he started noticing at his daycare that other of his friends were, getting picked up after school with the baby in a carrier. And he thought that looked fun. He wanted one too. And so, life was busy with work and school for him, but we knew that we wanted him to have a sibling. And so I was pregnant a few months later and everything was going well. And about 12 weeks along, my doctor mentioned that we could do a blood test to find out the gender of the baby. And I'm a planner. I thought that sounded like a great idea. And so we did that. And about 10 days later, I received a call that it was a lady baby, but that she tested positive for trisomy 18. And so many people are very familiar with Down syndrome, and that is called trisomy 21. And trisomy 18 is typically a more severe version. So a lot of heart defects typically, or brain defects. And in our particular case with Annabelle, we found out that she would be born, if she was born alive, with a 2-chamber heart instead of a 4-chamber heart. So based on that and her having trisomy 18, and I just had a really hard time with that, of course. I think emotionally, physically, pregnancy is already hard on your body. So there was a lot that I was going through. And at the time, I was a high school volleyball coach, and we were about to start our season. And I just really felt strongly that all the coaching that I had done over 20 years of just asking young students to fight their hardest, no matter the outcome, try their best, give it their all. And if you lose or win, you can walk away feeling like you did everything you could. I felt like this was my battle to fight for. And I announced to my team what was going on at the start of the season, because it was a very high chance that I wouldn't make it to the end of the season. as we think teenagers are sometimes and as self-centered as they can be, these girls in that moment really rallied together behind me and my family to support us and to make the experience as good as it could be for what it was. And we won the state championship that year in volleyball. And I truly believe it was because of them acting selfless and just kind of playing for something bigger than themselves. I think it's always great to have purpose with and passion with everything that you do. And that also helped me get through the pregnancy and feel like I had an army of troops surrounding me. We called ourselves Annabelle's Army in support of her life. And I did give birth to her about a month and a half after the state championship, and she was born alive, which again, no one expected. I was a bit of a spectacle in the OR because every doctor and nurse wanted to witness this baby that wasn't supposed to be born. And she was the first live trisomy 18 birth at this very large hospital in Dallas that any of these doctors and nurses had encountered. And when they got her out, she wasn't breathing. They prepared me to meet her not alive. And if she would breathe, they believed it would be very, very short-lived, maybe an hour, hours. But as soon as breathing my chest, she did turn pink and was breathing and was steady on her own without oxygen or any assistance. And that little girl went on fighting for 6 days. And, you know, as a mother, like, she was never in pain. She was comfortable and happy in my arms and got to meet all of our family. But I really believe that this is more a story, not just my story, but a story of, I mean, my book is called When Wishes Change. So the concept that we need to teach our kids and each other that when something you've always wished for doesn't come true, that you can't be paralyzed in fear and disappointment. Although you need to take time to grieve or to process the loss or the change of your wish, we have to be able to move forward and seek opportunity out of a tragic situation. And I think so many times you think, oh, why would this happen to me? And it's not fair. But life isn't really about fairness. It's about how we respond to those unfortunate circumstances that do happen in our lives. And so I have really learned over the last 7 years that my, faith, my perseverance, my resilience, and my hope ultimately is what got me through that hard time. And I was able to turn it into some good instead of only seeing it as a bad situation.
Well, I certainly, as I shared with you, could relate to your story. My husband and I had our first child a little earlier than you, 1981, and about halfway through, I told the doctors I felt there was something off with the pregnancy, something wrong, and they sort of poo-pooed and said all new mothers feel that way, and they did not let me have a sonogram, which was rather new back then. That was still a new concept and toy, so to speak, and they just didn't do them lightly. I see that as a blessing in some ways because certainly a sonogram would have verified that she had hydrocephalus, microcephalus, and would probably would not live a quality life. And so she lived about 5.5 weeks at Children's, and of course we were there. But again, one has to think of the blessings and the whys and do reflections. And so but now my thing didn't lead to the need to put this all in a book. Tell us, how did that happen? How did this lead to a book?
So I guess about 2 to 3 years after she died, I just felt really strongly about putting it into words. Part of it, I think, is the fact that she lived 6 days and I stayed awake for all of that. There was a lot of memories I think I suppressed or that I was not able to process at the time. And part of it for me was wanting to really remember and hold on to the things that did happen so that I wouldn't forget. However, what I came to realize was that was too soon. I felt that if I started writing, I would be so overcome by grief and sadness that I couldn't just close the laptop and go back to my young family, with my, at the time, 6-year old and baby, 1-year old. And so I decided to wait a little bit and see what would happen. And it was about Thanksgiving 2019 when all of a sudden I just felt like I was in a better place. It was right at the 5-year mark. And I felt like it was time and I was more ready and that I could write and have emotions, but then I could put it down and I could still focus my time and energy on my family or my work. And along that time, obviously 2020 or 20 and then into now, we got into the pandemic and I just kept writing and writing and writing as much as I could. And what was really neat was that once I jumped into it, I might in the middle of the night wake up and all of a sudden a memory that I had suppressed was like flying back into my head and I could remember every detail of a moment. And so I would just open my laptop and write and write and write. And after I finished writing, I put it away for a few months. And then I was introduced to an editor through a friend who I just fell in love with and felt like she was really the right fit to be the editor to really put this together. And I know that in a lot of ways it was really lethargic, but again, because we had gone through this pandemic at this point, the title, it actually came to me in a conversation with my editor. And we were like, wow, when wishes change, that means so much more now to people than it did when I started writing in 2019, because all of us have had something in our lives majorly change, whether it be someone you lost through COVID or a job loss or income loss or just job changes, so much change during that time. And so we began to see the book as something that we wanted to not be just my story, but everybody's story, to feel all the feelings along with me, that when my wish changed, I was sad, I was angry, I was disappointed, but I was still pursuing hope and pursuing opportunity and pursuing that there was more to come out of this. And then that happened. So it kind of evolved over a period of time, but I kind of always felt that calling, but it took me a while to be ready for it.
So you had the calling to write the book. You really, and I will tell you, I've had several authors on who use the pandemic time as an opportunity to put, because things force them to slow down. I had a couple of young ladies from the Miss America pageant, Miss Texas pageant, and they wrote kids' books during that time. And they were forced to slow down, and productive things still happened. So you wrote the book, and then what happened? Because there's more to the story.
Yeah, well, as I came up with this title, When Wishes Change, the full-time job that I had had for 16 years in a school and in administration and coaching, all of a sudden it felt uncomfortable and all of a sudden it didn't feel right. And it was like God's way of saying, hey, listen to your own book title, When Wishes Change. And I never dreamed of leaving that job. I really believed I would stay there for the rest of my life, and that was going to be my story. But something inside of me just said, hey, this is the time to start something new. And I started pursuing all kinds of different jobs and trying to figure out what it was that I was supposed to be moving on to. And when the editor and the book started coming together and the publishing was coming together, and then I was presented with the opportunity that I could speak and do public speaking with this message. And then all of a sudden I had someone contact me about consulting with a volleyball club, being like a director of coaching so that I could help young coaches learn how to coach, which I love to do. And then I am now pursuing consulting with a group that does educational consulting. So kind of the old work that I did in the school. And my entire life is changed. Like in the last year, all of my wishes that I thought would come true didn't. And it's been uncomfortable at times and it's been confusing. And I went through some anger and frustration and a lot of questioning, but I'm able to move forward. I wasn't paralyzed in that, and I've found the good and the joy and the hope that have come out of these new things. And I always say I feel like I'm working all the time because that's kind of what you do when you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
But I also find that like today when my kid's school emails at noon and says come pick up your kids in an hour, and it's like almost an ice storm out here. I'm like, I can do that. I can stop what I'm doing. I can go get my children. I can safely get them home. I mean, granted, they're in front of the TV watching a movie right now. But I have more flexibility than I had before. And I know that they're recognizing that mom is around more because when I was coaching, I was gone all the time. I was gone at night all the time. And I loved it. I loved it so much. But I knew that I'd come home and my babies were already in bed and I didn't get to say goodnight to them. And that was really difficult. So my own book taught me a new lesson in 2021, and a lot of wishes changed once again for me.
So you have this miracle 6 day baby that has now, years later, led to a change in career, a change in perspective, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, a change in your relationship with your higher powers. And what impact is it having when you speak in front of audiences? What impact is she having, is your story having on your audience?
So that's probably been the most exciting part of all of this is I really have a passion for speaking to high school and college age kids because I worked with high school kids for 20 years. And as you can imagine, there's not really a lot of kids in high school that have ever experienced anything like this, like child loss and dealing with what we did. However, that message, when wishes change, I'm able to tell them my story and explain to them the heartache and the disappointment and how I had to, pivot and see opportunities out of this challenge, and then relay it back to what they're going through in their lives. Because I still work with teenage girls in volleyball, and I really believe I understand teens and college age students really well. And I understand the stress, the anxiety of getting into your dream college or trying to figure out what you're going to do with your life. Or for me, a lot of athletes, am I going to be able to play this sport in college? Am I even good enough? And just battling adversity and working towards their next goal. And like I said, a lot of those dreams won't come true. It's not just they don't have dreams and wishes. You should be dreaming and wishing all the time and setting goals. But we teach kids like shoot for the stars. You can be anything you want to be. But what happens when they don't become the president of the United States or an MLB player, right? Like that's what every little boy says they're going to be. What happens when, they're a financial planner or they didn't get into law school and so they go a different route? How are we helping youth today be empowered when their wishes don't change or that they don't come true and they start to change? And that's where I feel like I have a distinct niche in my calling is I'm here to support you in your wishes and dreams, but I'm also here to be realistic with you and tell you that something's going to go wrong in your life. Your mom might get cancer, somebody in your family might die, you and your siblings might get in an argument, you and your boyfriend may not be together forever like you think when you're 14, but that's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And with teens these days, with the numbers that we've seen, increases in depression, anxiety, suicide, they need to hear that. They need to be empowered to hear that it's okay to not be perfect and to not have every wish they ever wish come true, because I don't think we say that enough.
Well, I think you're right about that. Matter of fact, as you were talking, I was thinking, wanting to mention our middle school girls. Gosh, right now they're the section that we really need to focus in on. Their suicide ideation is off the chart. It's like 50% more than it before COVID, and it's just awful. And so being able to bring this kind of message to them whether from a parent or from teachers, right? Because we have both in our audience. And I will be putting your link to your book through Amazon in the comment section so people can order your book. But it's also not only for parents. I would guess, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'd love to have book clubs and other organizations who are looking for motivational speakers with a true story that is impactful and maybe relevant to, unfortunately, to a lot of couples like myself, right? My husband and myself.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Since I do coach, I do a lot of private lessons, and I have a big group, a population of kids that are in 7th and 8th grade that do lessons with me. And I feel like that's such a tender spot in my heart, because I love that age. I think, like you said, they're just so insecure, and there's just so much going on in their head. I want to boost their confidence and make them feel good about themselves. But since these kids have gotten to know me and they found out I wrote a book, almost all of them have ordered it and have read it. So 7th graders reading this book. And also, at the high school level, I had a lot of kids reading the book, and I really wanted feedback from that audience, because that's not exactly who I thought would be the audience. But I thought, wow, okay, you guys are reading it. Please give me feedback. And the depth of understanding and the ability to relate to me and how it related to them and their story personally was out, like, to me. I was really like that way. And like spoken at high school, around the room, like a girl start crying and lay her head on her best friend's shoulder, or a boy brought to tears afterwards telling me how hard his life is right now because his dad left the family, or mom has cancer, and they had been so angry and mad, and we're hiding those emotions because they didn't feel like it was appropriate. And me just being able to say, I was so mad at God, and I was so mad at the situation, and I was frustrated, and I cried all the time. And I didn't fake it. Like, if I was sad, I let myself be sad. And of course, in like work situations, I still had to put on a certain front. But with the people I was close to, I decided not to do that. It was like, you know what? You're going to see me and all of me. And guess what? They still loved me after that. And they still were there for me. And they didn't think I was a crazy person or that I was, emotionally unstable. They just supported me and loved me. And I think a lot of kids needed to hear that message, that just by being vulnerable doesn't mean you're going to lose your friends or that people won't respect you anymore. If anything, they'll see that you're genuine and that you have, troubles in it, and your whole life isn't Instagram perfect. And so maybe just allowing them to let down their guard and be honest, I think, was really powerful.
And so necessary, especially based on the last 2 years. And, sometimes I fear that COVID is becoming a cliche. Unfortunately, it's leaving, negative statistics behind on its way, right, to being a cliche. So as much as we have to, try to move away from thinking about the impact that the pandemic has had on all of us, it's had an impact, and it's going to be with us for years, whether instructionally, emotionally, and so forth, So, as always, we like to bring positive messages to our audience so that we can give them additional strategies, tools, and opportunities to think in a more positive way. So I thank you for that. I thank you for sharing your story, and, good luck. We need more of you out there. Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Always. Thanks. All right. And while she pops off, let me finish. As always, our time together is never slow. It's always fast. But since you have kids, you might want to listen to this. This is our last little, we have 5 minutes left. And I like to bring positive things. I like to bring the politics, which I brought way too much politics about public ed. So I like to break it up. But I bring a lot of wellness information to our parents and our teachers. And this was one that caught my eye. Now is the time to build your child's bone bank account. And so we don't think a lot about our kids' bones and bone health. We think more, and now that I'm on the other side of 60, I am having to think about bone health, but really it's too late at 60 to think about bone health. We should be thinking about it earlier. So this was a good article, a good time to bring that back into our, especially kids, parents with kids. So your child's bone health may not be your first concern when you think of optimal nutrition and how it impacts your kid's health. After all, osteoporosis is largely affected by older adults. Hello. But the adolescents reaching 90% of their peak bone mass by age 18 for girls and 20 for boys, bone health is absolutely a health issue for kids, right? And it's getting to peakness by 18 that we sort of, the new expression now in wellness is eating now for health later. Well, same with kids. Kids eat at a young age for bone health later. So we think of bone health as a savings account. Bone is living tissue that is turned over constantly with regular deposits and withdrawals. During childhood and adolescence, bones are primed to make the highest rate of deposits possible for use throughout the rest of the person's life. Many nutrients work in concert to provide the framework for healthy bones. Calcium, of course, lies at the forefront, but vitamin D, magnesium, vitamin K, and regular physical activity are also important. Calcium, of course, is good to have in each meal and snack. Milk, cheese, yogurt are rich in sources of calcium, and for instance, an 8-ounce glass of milk provides 300 milligrams of calcium, or about 1/4 to 1/3 of the recommended daily intake. Other non-dairy food sources include almonds, broccoli, kale, turnip greens, figs, and tofu prepared with calcium. Some foods and beverages are fortified with calcium, including certain juices, cereals, and plant-based beverages. Now, just to be transparent, because you don't know me, I'm vegetarian, and I'm a huge proponent of plant-based food, plant-based milks, and so forth. I'm a little bit about the milk lobby and how they've taken over our nutrition program at the schools, but that's for another day. Vitamin D, sun exposure triggers it, and it's very important, but it can vary with skin pigmentation, season, and geography. So, of course, if you live in the north, you need oftentimes those sunlights, right? But you can add natural sources of vitamin D, including egg yolks, mushrooms, fatty fish such as salmon and tuna. You can find vitamin D in fortified sources such as orange juice, milk, and some non-dairy beverages. And of course, talk to your pediatrician about giving vitamin D supplements to be able to reach the 600 recommended IU per day. If by chance, you get those picky eaters who only want mac and cheese. So they may have to take a supplement, right? Magnesium, look for foods like almonds, spinach, black beans, oats, peanut butter, avocado, and potato. Those aren't too bad, right? Kids like those. Vitamin K, leafy green vegetables such as kale, turnip greens, cabbage, spinach, and broccoli, rich in vitamin K. A small amount of vitamin K is made from bacteria in the colon, but it's unclear how much our bodies are able to produce. And I've read that really you need to match the vitamin D with the K for them to absorb correctly. Physical activity. Ugh, if you know anything about me, I am huge on this, especially during the pandemic, about getting outside, walking after dinner, right, with the family. That was so nice to see that happening. Regular weight-bearing exercises stimulates bones and makes them stronger. Try activities such as running, hiking, dancing, tennis, gymnastics, basketball, volleyball, soccer, and weight training to build bones. Of course, you can't do weight training too early. My husband has a disability from weight training at 14, unsupervised weight training at his middle school back in the, really long ago, but it's led to 5 back operations and all that. So you really have to be cautious and be careful with the coaches at the schools overdoing it with the athletes too. I'm sure you've seen that. And being mindful of these bad for the bone actions. Here we go. And of course, most kids don't do some of these, but some parents do, or it's time for parents to talk about why it's important not to smoke, not to drink alcohol, dieting and disordered eating, under eating for the athletic training, which can result in compromised hormonal status, absent or missed menstrual periods because we're too slender, we don't have enough fat in our bodies. One of the things that I push is trying to move away from the athletic snack pack for soccer moms, the Gatorade, the granola bar, and the Cheetos, or the the fish crackers. All of that, if you put the three of those, that gives more carbs and calories and junk than they need all day. And that's one snack. Go back to the oranges. Remember those? When we all had oranges instead, right? So to sum it all up, undereating during times of athletic training may result in compromised hormonal status, which can impact bone health. And females that have missed or irregular menstrual periods are also at risk. Children and adolescents that receive the best interplay with nutrients and physical activity while avoiding practices that harm bones can maximize their bone-saving potential. So again, that was sort of a unique article that sort of caught my attention, trying to get parents to, I need to remember that. I'm a memory trigger type of person, and I hope that you've gotten a little bit, of course, you're a coach, so you may be preaching this to the choir, but thank you for listening and staying on with us. As always, everyone, thanks for being on, and we will see you again next week. Good night, goodbye, everyone. Not good night. Goodbye, everyone.